Hi class, this is the third module, and this will be the first of three audio PowerPoints. The last one, just like the ones before, will be on sales. The first two will be on on marketing. So this first one is over Chapter 10 and Chapter 11. And you might recall that I said in the first lecture that I did that for me marketing came down to answering three questions over time. What's my product or service? Who is my customer? And what is my value proposition? So these three questions have relevance to today's lecture, especially in regard to what is a product, and then in Chapter um, 11, different ways we deal with the promotion of a product. So a product is different than a service. A product um, can last for quite a while, whereas a service is usually consumed in the moment. The service generally has a strong experiential component to it, whereas a product generally does not, although ours doesn't have to, but most companies try to create some kind of experiential component with their product in its consumption or utilization. So this is a good slide that I use, I think, in my other classes in demonstrating that a product is more than just what we name it to be. A good example would be if you've ever been into a Macy's or a Nordstrom store. The core product in both cases is a store, but that's the same for TJ Maxx or Ross. Um, and these examples vary across the country from brand to brand, but you all have your own favorites, and I think that makes a distinction again between what is the actual core product versus if you were to define it deeper. Let's stick with Nordstrom's and Macy's as compared rather to TJ Maxx or Ross's. In the first two, there is a deeper uh, experience when you go in, particularly, let's say, to Nordstrom's. Um, they have a really wonderful warranty element. You're treated very respectfully, regardless of what part of the store you're in. There is no line to purchase something. There are little nondescript kiosks around that people will ring you through. The brand names are different. Even with the brand itself, Nordstrom's versus TJ Maxx or Macy's versus TJ Maxx, there's a different picture in your mind's eye around um, each one of those. If you thought about an iPhone versus, let's say, a Samsung, it's the same thing. The packaging is different. There's different brand equity that goes with each one. Some loyal followers on both sides would argue that the quality level of their preferred choice is just as good or better than the other one. The way they're sold is differently. Is different. They're sold differently. Packaging is just really different. Anyway, and warranties. So the whole experience in buying them is really very different if you haven't been into, let's say, an Apple store. And Apple's done a very good job of working a broader dimension, not just into the experience of the purchase itself, but even when you unwrap it. I mean, their boxes are they're just the best. It really adds to the experience to take it out of the packaging. It's a little bit like Christmas, at least for me, every time. So those things are important in defining the overall product. Now there's different kinds of products. There's convenience products, there's shopping products, unsought products, and specialty products. And we talk about things like the product itself, going back to the core product, but also a product line, and then a product mix or category. Product categories is another one around the products or services of a particular company. So what is a product line, for example? Let's start there. Well, here's a good example of a product line. The basic product itself is aspirin, but it is categorized uh, around use and application. So you have people taking bare aspirin for different reasons, just for pain, uh, might be for extreme pain. In this example, if you can see the cursor on the top left, they're talking about it's a wonder drug for your heart, and it's buffered so that it doesn't give you a stomach ache. Over here we have the genuine on the right of that, genuine pain relief. And then you have a low dose at 81 milligrams, which is 1/4 of the standard 325 milligram choice. And people take this, as I said, like proactively for preventing heart attacks. And then you've got extra strength. And that's what they call a product line, where the fundamental product is the same, but it comes in different forms to satisfy different needs. If you think about others, lots of other products do this. Coca-Cola, for example, has a standard core product, but it comes in different flavors. That's the most common kind of both of these examples, Bear and Coke, are the most common kind of product line extension, where the fundamental product is the same and they just change the formulation of choices within that particular line. This is an example of product mix, or what we also call category extensions. Once upon a time, all Arm & Hammer did was make baking soda. But then they discovered through focus groups that people also used baking soda to brush their teeth and to put in their refrigerators to absorb odors. They found this out in the 70s, and then all through the 80s and 90s, they have gradually levered that fundamental value proposition around whitening and odor to expand into product category extensions or product mixes that leverage that and capitalize on that, thus being a good fit. So you've got kitty litter, you've got in the lower center, you've got deodorant, and you've got toothpaste, and you've got laundry detergent, and there's some others besides that. But these are all examples of how Arm & Hammer took its fundamental value proposition and applied it to other product categories. It's an example of something actually they call the halo effect, which is if it's good at this, in this case, if it's good at absorbing odors in your refrigerator, it's probably good for odors in your deodorant or in your laundry. Or if it's good at whitening, brushing your teeth, then a toothpaste line would seemingly be the same. So what are some of the advantages of product lines? Well, you get kind of standardized brand awareness, and you get what I call this halo effect that goes from one reformulation or application to another. And there's lots of economies of scale around those. You get some package uniformity. If we went back to the other one, all these different Arm & Hammer products are easily recognized by their logo and consistent coloring from package to package. Branding is an important element in any business or new product development, because what you want is for your product to be recognized on a local, regional, national, and global level. So regardless of where you travel in the world, if you see a McDonald's, you recognize it immediately by the golden arches. In the same vein, PepsiCo, I had mentioned, I think, in another audio, that has been very good at getting into different complementary category mixes. They started this in the 70s when they were competing with Coke, that they saw that two things: that if the delivery truck was going to go to a store to drop off Coke, it could just as easily drop off related products, and that the delivery person could set up many of these related products, like snacks, like Frito-Lay snacks, right around where the soda is distributed as well. So they got some economies of scale out of their delivery people. They also, in those decades of the 70s and 80s and 90s, bought up a lot of the fast food restaurants that have been growing, that were growing and have been growing along with the boomers and their kids. And they cornered the fountain sales in those restaurant chains, and fountain sales are by far and away the most profitable. All the different kinds of different sales, because you're just selling syrup in a container and dispensing it out through a fountain, and so lots cheaper in terms of its promotion, packaging, etc. It's really just a choice in a restaurant. There are many examples of advantages for private brands. A private brand being a generic brand. For Safeway, it's Select. For Walmart, it's Equate. And I forget what it is in Kroger. I think it's just Kroger. But they all have their own label on competing products within the store. They're not. They have a captive audience. That's a huge advantage for private brands. They have ready buyers looking for different kinds of products, so it simply makes sense for them to carry competing brands and offer them at cheaper prices. In the case of aspirin, the ingredients in a equate bottle of aspirin is absolutely identical to that of a Bayer. In some cases, maybe even made at the same factories. It's just that Bayer incurs a lot of uh, marketing expenses, promotional expenses, and in that process of promoting itself, develops and fosters perceived value, perceived benefits on the part of its customers. So you think you're getting a better product, and if you think it hard enough, as they say, reality is 90 perception, or reality is 95% perception. Whether it's true or not, if you believe it to be, there you have it. It's true. Uh, Packaging is an important part of a business. If I bought a set of sheets, no, I bought some candy actually, some Hawaii chocolates at Costco the other day, and I wanted to take them into the office, and that plastic bag, that the plastic container that's almost an identical shape as what you would find sheets in if you went to Target, fits absolutely perfectly crossways into uh, Target Target bag. And so there's lots of um, standardization across shapes of different objects so that they all fit together in common containers like bags. The same is true for boxes of something that fit into a crate or a carton, that they all are sized for the most part until they so that they can all fit in common shapes, so that when you fill a container, whether that's Campbell's soup or whether it's Charlie tuna or whatever, ultimately the dimensions of the cartons or cases that the cans are in are all common dimensions. They're not exactly the same shape, but the dimensions are common, so that when you again fill any given space, you're filling it in total. And there's lots of money to be made when for different kinds of products when that's not true. There's a story on a video of Costco that uh, one of the employees discovered that if they changed the shape of a container of nuts slightly that sat on the shelf, they could fit more into the box without giving up volume. So they required that of the supplier, and they ended up saving a couple $100,000 or more. It might have been $500,000 just on this one single item by modifying the packaging just a little bit. So again, some issues for global branding. You get the advantage of it being everywhere. You get your name across different markets. Uh, you get brand recognition through um, through common awareness, some things that you have to be concerned about. In a global environment, there's different regulations in different places. For example, the United States and New Zealand are the only two places in the world that allow drug companies to advertise on television. And so, um, as a consequence of that, the whole promotional strategies for different kinds of drug products is very different, given that that particular venue is not available. Okay, developing and managing new products. If you think about it, there's two ways that a company can increase its revenues and or its profit, which are two different things. The first thing that it can do is reduce expenses, obviously, to increase profits. But the other thing that it can do is increase revenues. That's what we're concerned about for the most part in marketing. There's many ways to do this. You can increase pricing, you can increase customer satisfaction, which reduces churn or turnover. You can retain customers through a number of techniques like increasing switching costs. That's what the mobile phone carriers and the banks do anymore. And you can add new customers, and you can do that through getting new market share or getting into new markets or buying out competitors. And then the other thing to do, which we're talking about today, is you can offer completely new products or services, new product line, new choices within your product lines, or new product lines or product mixes altogether. Altogether, new category extensions. There's a number of different kinds of new products, new to the world entirely, new product lines as we talked about, product line additions, adding another flavor of Coca-Cola or another light beer in a still fancier container of some kind. Uh, then that being the case, we're concerned, particularly with new product introduction, in how it diffuses or proceeds through the market. Place. Now, one of the things that we're concerned about that has an effect on that is how different people in the market react differently to new products. There are a cadre of people, particularly around technology products, but it's not limited to that, but that's a very good example, that want to have the newest and best thing all the time, or the newest and best TV. And so They and the early adopters are the ones that companies will try to appeal to. It's a little bit personality defined, but it's also so defined by income and age. Eventually, we want to get our product through the early adopters, through the early majority and the late majority. Think in terms of a cell phone, how many of you probably have parents who still don't own a cell phone or didn't get one until very, very recently. I got my first one in the early 1990s when Motorola came out with the first one. I'm a little slower to move anymore. So how fast something goes through the market depends on its complexity, its compatibility with different markets. That could be culturally based or age based again, how quickly it can be learned through observation and so forth. So one of the things that we're concerned about in the diffusion process is the communication uh, processes that complement it as a means to drive it through the marketplace. One of the best ways, obviously, that we hear over and over is word of mouth, and that is usually accelerated or complemented um, through extreme adaptation factors around the product. If it's fashionable, if it's has cachet, so on and so forth. And then the other way is direct one-on-one or mass means that the marketer gets it in front of prospective customers. One of the things that's really important in promotion and the development of a new product is the product life cycle. product life cycle tells us that a product goes through a lifespan much like a person, where it's introduced into the world, it grows, it matures, and then it declines. So the baby, small child, adult, elderly person who, like myself, forgets from time to time exactly where the restroom is. I have to be reminded. It's not true, but I'm making a point. So we treat a product differently as it goes through its product life cycle. For a cell phone, something like an iPhone, that product life cycle is about 18 months. And for something like Tide, it's about 3 or 4 years. So Apple comes out with a new cell phone model, they have so far, at least. We're into number 7, I think, about every 18 months. And so that would imply it started about 8.5 years ago, and I bought my first one, I think, in 2008. So it's a fairly accurate way to tell when the thing was first released. As they get harder to add new features to, that's basically what they did. I'm sure they could have put many of these features into the first one, but strategically it makes sense to withhold some of them for subsequent iterations, so that people that didn't buy it, the late adopters and stuff, they will start to buy in the third or fourth iteration. So strategically, you want to lay out a plan of how you're going to introduce this thing into the marketplace over time. And what you want to have is, like I just said, for most products, is subsequent iterations are subsequent forms that you can improve, that you think ahead of time you're going to improve it to get people to reuse it or to move it back down the growth cycle. And I mentioned Tide. Every 3 or 4 years, there's a new and improved version of Tide that comes out, around which they can advertise for 3 or 4 months, and then sit back and just wait till the next time that sales start to drop off a little bit, and then come out with another new and improved version, which is new and improved rarely in some real way. It might be form, like from powder to liquid, but it might be some kind of reformulation or whatever. But when you have a product like that, you want to think about that before you ever release it, is how you're going to keep sales robust over time through whatever modifications you might have. And that's the end of this video.